Well, welcome back to the When I Heard This podcast. My name is Nate Robinson. I'm here with Pastor Joseph Tillman, MDiv, soon to be Demon. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing really well, man.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
Great.
Yeah. We're on Good View.
Still
there.
Yep.
We made it through one episode.
They haven't kicked us off yet.
I'm feeling pretty optimistic about
At
it.
the time that this comes out, it'll be 2.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So
Yep.
We're still there.
We're still there.
So
yep.
We're in the
We're
Jesus
doing a thing.
video
World
club now. Somehow.
Us and CBN.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's where we
and
are.
Billy Graham.
And Billy Graham.
It goes Billy Graham,
Right.
us.
Right. C.S. Lewis Institute right below us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Below us.
Below us.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. C.S. Lewis got nothing
On us.
on the When I Heard This podcast.
Yeah.
Available now on Goodview. Above C.S. Lewis. But below Billy Graham.
But below Billy Graham. Everything's below Billy Graham.
Right.
Yeah.
Not Jesus, though.
But not you're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
If Jesus had a show on there,
his show would be
his
first.
show would be first.
Then Billy.
Then Billy. Then us.
Right. Then us. Correct.
And then
And
whoever C.S. Lewis is.
What? You've at least like read or watched Chronicles of Narnia.
I've watched
Lion, the Witch, and the
Chronicle.
Wardrobe.
I've read Lion, Witch, and Wardrobe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of people know C.S.
It's
Lewis
dumb.
from that. What? It is not. It's a great movie.
It's dumb.
Well, it's a great book.
The book is fine.
The book.
The
The
movie
movie's a little-
sucks. All version of those movies are stupid.
I mean, that's the best of the movies, though. Like if you've watched
Which one?
the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe one, that was done by
Like in 2003?
yeah.
Okay. Well,
That was the best one
that movie
of
was
all the others that were made of that book, and the best one. I think the best movie of all the others that were made after that too.
that movie just wished it was Lord of the Rings, and it definitely was not.
No, it was not Lord. But
Yeah.
it's not as bad as you're making it out to be, though.
It's fine.
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine. But I like C.S. Lewis for things like Mere Christianity and
Yeah, but after you
other
go watch
things.
Lord of the Rings,
That's right.
and then you go to that movie, you're like, I'm just
Okay,
going to watch Lord of the Rings. Because this movie wanted to be
sure.
Lord of the Rings so bad.
Yeah, and Lewis and Tolkien were
buddies.
they were friends.
Yeah.
yeah. So, but
Yeah.
the movies that were made
Anyway,
from
we're better
Tolkien's
than
work.
C.S. Lewis,
right?
according to
Us.
Jesus,
I don't think
who is
Jesus,
the top.
I don't think Jesus has ranked. them
I talked
that
to him
way.
last night
You did.
in my prayers.
That's good.
Yeah, and he said,
That's what. Be
He's-
careful what
he-
you're going to quote Jesus is saying now.
no, he said that C.S. Lewis said, because C.S. Lewis is up there,
Right.
that
So he
we're
asked-
better than he is.
Okay, so he asked CS, and then
Yeah.
CS Lewis was
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, of course they're
So
better."
it wasn't anything that Jesus said. He was just quoting.
He was just passing along
Yeah,
information.
yeah.
Okay.
So
All right. I don't know. I have a
C.S.
feeling.
Lewis?
I have a feeling this is like the game of telephone,
yeah, it is.
where eventually things just get completely lost and muddled.
Well, I don't think Jesus gets anything wrong.
Right. I'm just
So
wondering
it
if
had
you
to
heard
have
it.
been perfect.
I'm wondering if you heard it correctly. That's all.
Oh, no. I was, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're perfectly in sync.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Well, yeah.
Okay.
We're number 3.
That's fine.
Come on, man.
Hey, man, I'm with you. I'm
All
with
right.
you.
All right. So today we're talking about testimonies.
We are.
Yeah, it's testimony time.
You are. I like the way you looked at the box just to make sure that was correct.
I was just referencing it for,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Come on.
I know.
I just told you I'm in tune.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Testimonies.
Testimonies.
Go to Patreon, $5. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow down. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast, and X and locals at When I Heard This. Tell everyone that you know about the show. Ring the notification bell and go to the website where there's t-shirts. That was probably the best I've ever done that.
That was incredible. Yep.
Good view quality.
I mean, right there.
Number 3 quality.
Number 3.
All right.
Okay, man.
Testimonies.
Yep.
I don't know how we're going to get a whole episode out of this. I know you were worried about it, but here we go.
Never.
I got
worried.
stuff to say.
I know you do. I was going to ask you about your testimony and then just sit back for 45 minutes. and let you
45
talk.
minutes. All right. So what is a testimony?
So
Definitionally, and whatever it means to Christians.
Okay. Well, so it comes from a word that means to do again. And so if I'm sharing a testimony, I'm kind of sharing about something that's happening again. So in other words, it's really the story of how God has once again worked in someone's life.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think we kind of understand testimony in the Christian circle, the Christian world, as someone sharing their personal story of what their life was like before Christ, once they came to know Christ, and then after coming to know Christ.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's 3 parts to this story.
I think there's 3 parts to this story.
Okay.
Yeah. Before you come to know Christ, coming to know Christ, after knowing Christ.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Just want to make that clear for the future questions. That there's 3 distinct parts of this story.
Yeah, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. I feel comfortable with that.
All right. So why are testimonies so important to Christians?
Okay. So I think for Christians, like, so if I'm talking about my testimony, it's important to me because it's basically the sharing of how I came to know Christ.
Okay.
And what God has meant to me and done in my life since knowing Christ.
Okay.
So I think that's why it's important to me. I think it's important to Christians in general because scripturally in Revelation 12:11, it actually talks about the fact that we overcome the evil one through the power of our testimony.
What?
Yeah.
What? Okay.
So for example, so
our story
uh-huh.
beats up the devil.
Correct.
Okay.
Because it's a testimony, it's a sharing of how we as like, so if I'm sharing my testimony, right, of how I came to know Christ, then I'm also, that part of that testimony is the fact of I was once in the kingdom of darkness.
Okay.
Now I'm in the kingdom of light. Satan lost.
Okay.
Okay. And so, and then it's also the fact of in my telling of that testimony, there's the fact that people may hear a testimony and go, oh man, the Lord uses that testimony to cause them to come to know Christ as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's why, because it's basically the triumphal story of individuals going from kingdom of darkness to kingdom of light. And so that's why we're overcoming by the power of our testimony. And so, I mean, for me, actually, like that's how I got saved. That's how I came to know Christ.
From hearing a testimony?
From hearing a testimony.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I was 17, in 96, I listened, I was at a retreat, heard a peer of mine give their testimony of how they came to know Christ. And that's actually what the Lord used to cause me to go up front in this chapel we were in, to go up front and to give my life to Christ.
Okay.
And that's where I met Christ.
What was so cool about this guy's testimony?
Well, I think what resonated with me was it was very similar to my story in some ways. It felt like, because one, I knew this person and I knew what they're like. I was familiar with them. They were a classmate of mine, and they were just talking about how for them, they had kind of felt this sense of like emptiness, I guess you want to put it that way. And then they came to know Christ and what it had been like since coming to know Christ.
Okay.
And for me, that resonated, that connected with me.
Okay.
And so it was just like, oh, wow, this person's coming to know Christ and look at how their life has transformed. Like knowing them, like, and going, man, look at what happened in their life for the last year since they came to know Christ. Here's someone my age. It was just, I think the Holy Spirit just used all those kind of connection points. And yeah, came to know Christ and been following him ever since.
Does anyone in the Bible tell their testimony to anyone? And also, does the Bible say anything about testimonies at all?
Okay. All right. So in Luke 8, there's the story of an individual who if you've read your Bible a little bit, you may have heard the story of Legion. And
Legion.
Yeah.
The multiple demon.
There you go. The multiple demon guy. Yeah.
That went into pigs?
Yes. Yep. So Jesus cast the demons out.
I know my demons. I know my Bible demons.
Okay.
Yeah. I watch a lot of movies.
All right. So Interesting. All right, so in Luke 8, so Jesus has cast out all these demons from this guy, and who apparently has like multiple demons within him. Like,
Yep.
I mean, a large number of demons. So the demons go out.
A legion of
a
demons,
legion
you
of
could
demons.
say?
There you go. And so a legion of demons, they go into the pigs because Jesus cast them out into the pigs, and then the pigs go, flying down. It says, or rushing down into steep bank into a lake, and they drowned.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
and the guy who owned all the pigs was like, "Dude,
yes, actually,
those were my pigs."
Right. And so they actually forced Jesus to leave the area.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's part of the story?
It's part of the story.
I just knew about the demon, not the rest of the story.
Well, no, you're actually right. So when it says here in verse 34, when the men who tended them, when they tended the pigs, saw what had happened, they ran off and reported it in the town and in the countryside. And then the eyewitnesses reported about how the demon man was delivered. And then all the people that were there in the area asked Jesus to leave. It says because they were gripped by great fear.
There was a guy with a bunch of cows. He was like, "Stay away from my cows."
Yeah, like, I need those things to make a living. And so, anyways, so then it says in verse 38 of Luke 8 that the man from whom the demons had departed begged Jesus earnestly to be with him. But he sent him away and said, "Go back to your home and tell all that God has done for you." And off he went, proclaiming throughout the town how much Jesus had done for him. And so here's this guy, obviously been completely set free, and so he wants to just follow Jesus like the other disciples had been following Jesus. But Jesus says, "No, you actually need to stay here, and you need to proclaim what I've done for you in your town."
Okay.
And so that's a story of testimonies. In John chapter 4, there's the lady at the well, and
the prostitute one?
Or the adulterous one.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And, where...
I know more Bible than I thought.
Man, look, you're on it today.
Wow.
You are on it today. And so Jesus goes into Samaria.
Every time they talk about an unnamed lady, though, it's always a prostitute in the Bible.
Not always, but
yeah,
sometimes it is.
It's like the Treaty of Paris for the Bible.
There's definitely prostitutes that are within Scripture here, for sure. Yes. All right. So, so the story of the woman at the well. Jesus meets her at the well in Samaria. She's getting water. He asks her for a cup of water. And then they start talking, and then he says, "Go call your husband and come back here." And then she replies, I don't have a husband. And then Jesus says, "Well, you said that correctly. You don't have a husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and the man that you are now with is not your husband." And so, and she's like, "You're a prophet." And he was like, "Yep, but I'm more than a prophet." And he goes on, and then she actually has this encounter with Jesus and begins to realize that Jesus actually is the Messiah, or at least possibly could be the Messiah. So it says that the woman left, in verse 28 of John 4, the woman left her water jar, went into town, and told the people, "Come, see a man who told me everything I ever did. Could this be the Messiah?" And they left the town and made their way to him. And so you have stories like this throughout the Gospels.
And then Jesus killed a bunch of pigs. The end.
That was a previous story. No,
and then Jesus went to another town and killed all their pigs.
No? Jesus just didn't like hopping from town to town killing everybody's pigs. That's not the way this is working. So, right. Yeah, but so the point is like through the Gospels, you have several people that have these encounters with Jesus, and then they end up going and telling other people what Jesus has done. So giving their testimonies, right?
Oh, okay. I got you.
Yeah.
Just like we tell about what Jesus has done for us.
Bingo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Even though Jesus was there.
Okay. Correct. And so I think one of the more interesting ones, or I don't know if you call it interesting, whatever, but in Philippians chapter 3, it's where Paul is actually writing a letter to the church in Philippi, and he starts actually sharing some of his testimony about who he was, what he was like before coming to know Christ, and then what life has been like for him since coming to know Christ. And so in Philippians 3, this is what Paul says to the Philippians, verse 3, "For we are the circumcision." So he's talking to the Israelites, like, we're the circumcision, the ones who worship by the Spirit of God, boast in Christ Jesus, and do not put confidence in the flesh. Although I have reasons for confidence in the flesh, if anyone else thinks he has grounds for confidence in the flesh, I have more. Circumcised the 8th day of the nation of Israel, of the tribe of Benjamin, a Hebrew born of Hebrews, regarding the law, a Pharisee, regarding zeal, persecuting the church, regarding the righteousness that is in the law, blameless. So here's Paul, and he's saying, before I came to know Christ, this is who I was. Mm-hmm. I was a zealot among Pharisees. I was an individual that was living as righteously as possibly one could live according to the law. And then he goes on in verse 7, he says, but everything that was gained to me. So all of this status, all of this learnedness, all of this, Paul's saying that all of these statuses and all the things that, he had gained through his learning, through his training, he was incredibly zealous among the Pharisees, highly respected among the Pharisees. He was a young man that was rising through the ranks really quickly. And he had all of this stuff apparently like going for him, right? And he says, but everything that was gained to me, I've considered to be a loss because of Christ. More than that, okay, I also consider everything to be a loss in view of the surpassing value of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. Because of him, I have suffered the loss of all things and consider them as dung so that I may gain Christ and be found in him, not having a righteousness of my own from the law, but one that is found through faith in Christ, the righteousness from God based on faith. And so what he's saying here is, my whole past, whatever was gained, whatever was accomplished, whatever status I had, it doesn't even matter.
Testimony.
Yeah, testimony. It doesn't even matter because now I have come to know Christ, right? And Paul gives his own description of coming to know Christ in Galatians chapter 1, where he's like, here was my revelation of Christ. Mm-hmm. Here's a revelation I had of coming to know Christ. And of course, you can read more of that account in Acts chapter 9. But then Paul goes on to say in verse 10, my goal is to know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death, assuming that I will somehow reach the resurrection from among the dead. In other words, here's what it was like before I came to know Christ. I came to know Christ. My goal in life since coming to know Christ is this. And for Paul, he's saying that is to know Jesus, the power of his resurrection, the fellowship of his sufferings, and being conformed to his death so that he might somehow reach the resurrection from among the dead. And so in other words, his whole life going forward is going to be about knowing Christ and following Christ. And so that's a bit of Paul's own testimony, kind of into those three, things of those three sections or phases of it of before I came to know Christ, now that I've coming to know Christ, and then after I have come to know Christ, what does it look like? So, yeah, so that's some examples of things in the Bible.
Okay, so why do churches have super special, like, it's testimony time meetings for people to come share their testimonies? It's like, we found this really testimonied person
right,
whose testimony's up the wazoo,
right,
and we're gonna have them come share,
right,
and everyone from around the town needs to come listen to this testimony. Why is it such a huge deal for a church to put on a testimony meeting?
Okay, yeah,
we're doing it at Tuesday at 3 p.m. for some reason, and it's just super special, and everyone needs to take off work and come to the testimony time.
Right. So Okay.
What's the deal?
I don't think they happen as much at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon.
It's always some weird, inconvenient time to come listen to this special testimony, and it's annoying.
No, it's annoying. Okay,
Yeah,
no.
and I hate your testimony. I hate it now.
You hate it just because of the inconvenience of getting there to hear.
And the overhype. It's just always overhyped.
Okay.
And I'll get why that's overhyped. They're always overhyped later.
Okay. Well, it's funny. So I was actually talking to someone about this yesterday. Like,
really?
Yeah. Like,
because we are going to talk about this?
No, because it actually was brought up in another context. But we were talking about like there's like old school revival meetings.
Yep.
That some churches still have them, like where they'll have like a 4-day revival meeting, you know? And so it's like you bring in special music, you know, and it's you bring in these special speakers, and inevitably like half the speakers are just there to give testimonies, right? Right. You got, which
is the easy thing to do. Talk about yourself. Of course. You don't have to know anything. You don't have to be good at anything except just talk about yourself.
Well, it is kind of wild too, though, because there are individuals like that's like what they do. Like they travel around just sharing their testimony. Yeah. Like that's like their whole ministry.
Wow.
Yeah. And I'm not making light of it. It's just like, but that's just kind of become a thing. Right.
Yep.
And I don't know if I'd be interested to know. I don't know if it's as much of a thing now, but it definitely used to be. Like we were talking about, you know, for example, like in your like more traditional churches, like, you know, where you're doing like hymns on Sunday mornings and, you know, that's kind of the more traditional liturgical kind of style. But during the revival meetings, it gets kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And like you bust out like the Gaither music.
We should set up an industry for this. Screw up your life real bad, then come to Christ. Travel around and talk about it.
Yeah. But like, so, you got the Gaither
$50,000 per speaking, per talk.
Right. And
Easy.
We'll handle all of your accommodations.
We get 20%.
Hopefully you're not charging people at the door.
Here's some needles. Go have fun.
Nate, that's the worst advice I've ever heard.
It's just, I don't know.
No, you should know. That's not
Some
good.
Christian's going to figure this out eventually.
Make a racket out of it? Yeah.
And then we'll hear about it later in a documentary with a bunch of sad people.
To be on Netflix.
Yeah.
All right. So
that's how this stuff goes.
It is. Oh God. All right. Anyways, back to all this. So like, you know, like on the revival nights, you have like, you know, like the contemporary like Gaither music and style music, and then you've got your revivalist like preach, like, because like there's like the revivalist preachers, right?
Yeah.
And then you've got also the ones that are there to like just, that's what they do. They share their testimonies, and so yeah, it's absolutely a thing. I remember in college, we all went to go hear someone speak because their testimony was that they had once been in the mob and now they were out.
Cool.
Right. One of the first testimonies I ever heard, like as a young Christian, actually, was someone that had been a paid assassin for our government. And that's what they did, and then came to know Christ. And so after all that,
I only killed 8 people after coming to know Christ.
All sanctioned by the government,
yeah.
So legal.
Right, legal.
Right. Yeah. Anyways, but yeah, you hear these like wild stories, right? It's always the guys that have, you know, they were, you know, running drugs for the cartel, or they were, you know, in the mafia, or they were, I guess, apparently assassins. And it's always these huge stories. And I think the reason that, well, there's probably a couple of different reasons, but I would hope that the reason that individuals like that are being brought in to speak is because, man, if Christ can do that work in their life, if they can come to know Christ, then it really doesn't matter what we've done in our life. It doesn't matter how bad we've messed up things in our life. We can come to know Christ as well. And so,
yeah, but that's not why they bring them.
Okay, so
why do they really bring them?
So you obviously have a take on this of why they bring them. So what is it?
They bring them so that the church can go, ooh, look at this weird person. Glad we're not that bad. That's why they do that.
Okay, I don't think so. I don't think it's a comparison
none
thing.
of us are this terrible.
I don't think it's like, let's bring in this guy with his crazy testimony so that we can feel better about ourselves. I really don't think that's the reason.
I think it is. Or money.
Well,
or to sell tickets. Come listen to Assassin Guy talk about assassinating.
Right.
Or assassinating. How many times can we say this on Good View? Assassinating people. Assassinating.
Right. No. So, anyways. No.
Pigs.
No, I don't think it has to do.
And donkeys.
Okay, so I really don't think it has to do with what you think it has to do with.
Okay.
I really do think it is.
Well, I really do.
Obviously.
Yeah.
But I really don't think I don't think it's like a comparison thing. Now, it might be.
Okay, well, not those people, but the people who they bring in who are like covered in tattoos and like,
right.
I used to be on some drugs.
Right.
And blah, they bring those people in for this reason. The assassin people are just to
cool story,
so they can put a James Bond poster up on the on the thing outside. Assassin's testimony,
right?
Never dies or whatever. Song by Celine Dion. That's why.
No.
So they can sell revival tickets and give away tote bags.
Again, hopefully we're not charging people to come into the door. But there is going to be the collection, right? You got to give an offering every night. That's obvious. You got to do that. So
for the assassin guy.
Right. Yeah. Right. Or else. So
for his private security now.
So, but I do think that there's a sense of, I do think what it is in a lot of ways is, man, if we bring these kind of people in, maybe we'll attract individuals that maybe will not normally come to church.
Right.
And that they will come, hear this testimony of someone who was, radically away from Jesus, like not following Christ, who have come to know Jesus and now radically living for him, that hopefully that testimony will actually lead to a powerful moment in these individuals' lives. Like, I would hope that's the actual ultimate goal, right?
Yeah.
And I do think that's legitimately the case in a lot of the instances. Because, I know that there are people who've been impacted by hearing testimonies and have come to know Christ through that. But I do also agree with you that, yes, I'm not oblivious to the fact that sometimes we bring in people like this for money grabs, because, or for more attention to be on this particular church, right?
Right. So
that people in the community will know about us and come and that kind of thing. So I'm not saying there's never ulterior motives. I guess maybe I'm hopeful, at least, that the motives are genuinely like, we want to see people come to know Christ.
Yeah, but I just don't understand why Assassin Guy has to connect his assassin past to his Jesus future.
Right.
Unless it's for flashy, showy offiness. And look at this guy.
Yeah.
Like, why does that have to be a part of it?
Yeah.
Like, you were an assassin for the government. So,
right.
What does that have to do with Jesus? Nothing. Right. That was your job. You were killing bad people, correct?
Yeah.
Right? For the government.
Right.
Just like anyone in the military.
Sure.
Why? Like, if a military person was telling their testimony, they would be like, I was in the military for this amount of time, and then all the rest would be about spirituality, Jesus something, or what sins they were doing, because that stuff wasn't sinning.
Yeah.
Correct? Killing bad people for the government's not a sin. Yeah. So why connect that to your testimony? That's the problem.
Right.
That's what so the whole
I see what you're saying. I think what happens is, because I don't think anyone ever sets out to be like, hey, I'm going to become the testimony guy. Like, I don't think they set out doing that. I think what happens, is like an individual speaks, they share, they give their testimony, and someone's like, oh, wow, that's an amazing testimony.
Yeah.
and then that person, it recommends them to somebody else, and then it starts
what a
moving.
bizarre industry, right? It's like picking up talent.
Yeah, it is.
But that's weird for this.
Yeah, I agree that it can be strange, no doubt, and
Okay.
I agree that there are individuals that are milking it, right? The
Okay.
industry, like I agree with that.
Okay.
But I also believe so. I do wonder this. I wonder. So, like, if I'm a church, or I'm a ministry, or whatever, right? And I'm wanting to have someone come in and share their testimony, I might go find Mafia guy, right, to come share their testimony. And so, obviously,
Is there a website for this? There's got to be. Pick your testimony. And there's categories.
right?
Like
how salacious do you want it to actually be?
Right. Prostitutes.
Right.
Yeah. Just
and
categories of stuff. Drug addicts.
Right.
Assassins.
Right.
There's some.
Right. Cartel.
Man, we were coming up with so many good business ideas today.
I mean, why are we not capitalizing on these things?
Testimony website for churches.
Yeah, if there's not one out there, there really should be.
There really should be.
No, I agree.
I mean, there shouldn't be, but someone's an idiot if they haven't created. I mean, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Is this going to become our side hustle?
This is our side hustle. Add your testimony. No, your testimony's boring.
Rejected.
Yeah.
No, so I do think that. So here's what I think. I think that there's like churches.
My wife knows how to make websites.
She really does.
We could do this.
We could do this. So don't take our ideas before we have time to do it ourselves. Yeah. All right. So anyways, I think that churches and groups that are looking to bring in people to speak, I think they're doing it for a lot of the right reasons. What I wonder sometimes, though, is the people who are traveling around giving their testimonies. I do wonder sometimes, do they get just kind of caught up in the trap of like, well, this is just my job. Like, this is what I'm doing. Right. Like,
yeah.
Does it become like a money grab,
And they get really good at telling it.
Yeah. They get really good at telling it.
They're basically doing what a comedian does.
Okay.
It's the same gig.
Just over and
You
over
go
again
around
in
and
different
say
places.
your same stuff in different places.
Yeah.
Forever.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
should that be a job? Should that be a job that exists? Is that good?
Yeah, because I think that people that are giving their testimonies, like, I think it's like anything. Like, I'm in ministry. Like, I could find myself doing it for the wrong reasons and, kind of thing, but so I want to give grace to people. I guess what I'm saying is I think it would be easier for them to fall into the trap of having maybe wrong motives of wanting to share, wanting to do, as opposed to churches that are looking for someone to come in and do it.
Okay.
So that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Okay, so we kind of already talked about it, but the people that bring up parts of their life to make their story cooler.
Okay. Yeah.
Like we just basically talked about it, but I don't know if you said anything about it. But
okay.
Just to make their story cooler to be a bigger testimony, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Jesus. I don't understand that.
Okay. Yeah.
Like, I know the parts of my life that have something to do with Jesus.
Right.
But
yeah, and I agree with you. Like,
my coming to Jesus.
Right. So, like, assassin guy, for example, right?
Yes, right.
Okay. So he came to know Christ after that.
Right.
And part of what led him talking about that was eventually the trauma he was beginning, or PTSD, or whatever you want to phrase it as, that he was beginning to feel as an individual that was doing some things in a pretty, what we would kind of call a cold-blooded manner. Mm-hmm. And it eventually was like catching up to him.
Okay.
Right. And so, and then starting to feel ashamed and that kind of stuff for what he had been doing, for taking life. And so then it was like, all right, in coming to know Christ, some of that kind of led him into this coming to know Christ and finding peace.
Okay.
So I do think that we share things in our testimonies at times that really don't have a connected point to us in our coming to know Christ. Okay. Right? Like, I do think that happens. And I would hope that the bulk of the testimony it's not just how, because I think what happens with testimony sometimes, it's like the whole testimony, like you talk for 30 minutes and it's like 25 minutes of all of the bad stuff or prior to knowing Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like coming to know Christ. And then like 2 minutes of, and it's been great ever since.
Right.
And I do think those kind of testimonies miss the mark.
Okay.
And the reason being is because the focus really isn't as much on Christ as it is on all this other stuff that happened prior to that.
I feel like they missed the mark, weighted the other direction a whole lot more, though. Like, I think the ones that we're talking about are like the big flashy ones that churches do.
Yeah.
But 99% of them are, I'm not going to mention any. Anyway, this is probably the next question.
Okay. Yeah.
99% of them are, I'm not going to mention any of the actual stuff I did. I'm just going to talk about the good enlightened part at the end.
Okay.
For 45 minutes.
Okay.
And
so you think you hear testimonies going the other way?
I think the big ones that the churches are going to bring in are the cool ones that you know, assassins and mafia people and whatever.
Okay.
And they'll talk about all the bad stuff because that's cool, interesting. But if you ask someone in your local church to give their testimony, they ain't going to say any of the bad stuff they did. They're just going to say, I was far away from God.
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, that's the next question.
But I don't think you're wrong, and I don't think they're wrong for addressing it that way. Because I think that, you know, I think for some people, on one hand, just giving too many like intimate details, if you were, is embarrassing. They feel shamed for it.
Yeah, but you just said that if assassin guy comes and talks about all of the prior embarrassing stuff, that someone might hear that.
Sure.
And be like, well, I've done some pretty shady stuff too.
Right.
So how come local person shouldn't tell all their embarrassing things also, so that someone sitting in the church can be...
No, and I don't disagree with the fact that we should share some things, right?
Okay.
But I don't know because I do think it's a difference of someone that's like in the church, in the community, versus someone that's just coming in from the outside that's going to be with you for like 2 days and they're gone.
Right.
Because they're not having to live with you from that point on, wondering what you think about them, knowing all of this stuff now. Yeah. And I'm not saying that's good and healthy completely, but I'm just also saying like I've also seen it go sideways. Like I've seen it.
Have?
Oh yeah. I've seen it where someone in a local congregation shared what was deemed to be too much and then being reprimanded for it.
Well,
and so
that's wrong.
Right. And I don't,
right.
Right. And I think it depends on the audience. I think it depends on, you know, how much detail we're getting into.
Okay.
Right. I don't think, like, if you're talking about, you know, in my past, you know, I was doing drugs and having sex and like, I don't think you need to go into like all of the details of those things.
Okay.
Would you, I mean, what do you think? Do you agree with that? Or do you think more details, the better?
Well, how, okay. So what's your scale of, if someone hears this, then they might think, well, I could be saved too.
Okay.
Like, how much detail are the people listening want?
Right. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. But I think that's what I'm saying. Like, I think like I can say sex, right? And that be like the general thing without having to go into details of all of those interactions.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So,
but if I think my sexual interactions were way worse than you saying I was in sexual sin before,
right?
Maybe I think my stuff's too bad, compared to what you. So that's why I'm saying, you know, like,
right.
It depends on what level of detail you're looking for. Like, how much should we actually say on stage?
Yeah. Well, like, if someone was up there and they said, they're talking about sexual sin, right? And they're saying, okay, I was involved in sexual sin. I was involved with, whether it be adultery or orgies or, pornography. Like, I think that's reasonable to say.
Yeah. So not like...
But I don't need to go into details beyond that. Like, by the way, there were 5 of us. And, I don't think, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, so, like, I think there's lines.
Okay.
In everything.
Okay.
So,
But what if I'm sitting in the audience and I was only in an orgy with 4 people? And I'm like, oh.
What?
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like, oh, there was only 4 of us. So if this person can get saved and there was 5 of them, then...
No.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I don't think people are going to think that way, Nate.
Why not? You don't think so?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that, like, when you're just giving, like, I think giving those broad statements, right? Because and, like, it may scare some people, like, in the congregation, like, you just saying the word orgy, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is, I can go to Galatians chapter 5.
It might scare Goodview also.
That it might. Sorry, Goodview. And so, but I can go to Galatians 5, and Paul talks specifically about that as being a sexual sin. Yeah, he lists it in sins of the flesh.
It's in the Bible.
It is in the Bible. I think you can give broad, like when I'm saying, like, I'm into I was into drugs. Like, I don't think you got to detail every moment and all the results of all those things. Like, I think when you give enough information to allow people to know what you mean by that and move on. Because again, the focus shouldn't be glorifying the sin, right?
Right.
It should be glorifying Christ. So I don't have to get caught up in all of the details of this, which can come across as glorifying sin, which can come across as, oh, that's way too much information. Didn't need to know that or hear that. Let's glorify Christ and what has he done. And that's where I also think that all these parts need to be there, because here's what it was like before Christ, and come to know Christ, and after Christ, and probably after Christ, there's hope. They're not hopefully, but the reality is there's going to be the realities of the struggles you've had fighting the flesh and everything else in your journey of knowing Christ.
Okay.
So anyway.
All right. So new question then. Okay. So the people who are so embarrassed when saying their testimony that they leave it up to, I was in a really bad place, and that's it.
Sure.
That's all you get. And then the rest of it is it's backloaded.
Right.
With here's how I came to know Christ, and then here's how amazing he's been since I came to know him.
Sure.
And they just leave it up to I walked away from church, and then I went to a really dark place in my life or whatever.
Right.
And that was a 10-year time span. And you're like, well, what? Like, don't you have to say something about any of that if you're going to give your testimony? And every time I hear a testimony like that, I'm like, well, this is stupid. Obviously, we all know God is good,
right?
And the end of the story is God makes it better. You just skip to the ending, to the ending, and told me it was great. No,
I get it, because it's like if you're telling a story, right?
Right.
You want to have that jarring moment of the right?
Yeah.
And then kind of that tension of that for a while before you get to the aha of, oh, I came to know Christ.
I guess what I'm really asking is the come to know Christ the conclusion of, or is it the climax of the story?
I think it's the climax of the story.
Or is it the inciting incident of the story?
Yeah, I think coming to know Christ is the climax of the story.
Okay, because if it's the climax of the story, then we've got like 15 minutes left after that to talk about how Jesus has
transformed you.
Right, and we should have talked about all the bad stuff that you did for an hour and a half. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't think, and maybe the climax is not the complete right way of, but, well, I don't think it's necessarily wrong. Like, I think there's that reality of, like, let's say you're giving a 20-minute testimony that, the the I came to know Christ moment, hopefully is somewhere around the 10-minute mark,
Okay.
I'm not saying testimony has to be 20 minutes. You have to do this right at 10. I'm not trying to give guidelines for the kind of thing. I'm just giving an example of, like, because there needs to be enough of the kind of that ramp way leading up to it, right? And so of where you do need it. Hey, and I guess if I was sharing, and this does label, I think it's different from person to person too, right? Like, I think for me, I feel more comfortable sharing some things in my past than maybe others would. And that's just a comfortable thing. I mean, I think for some people, just talking in front of others is just horrifying in and of itself. It's completely scary, right? And so then you're asking them on top of that to throw in really intimate details that they may feel embarrassed by. I think that can be a hard ask for some people. Okay. So I do understand why someone leaves things as vague as they may do. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's wrong. I think maybe as an individual grows and they mature and they become more comfortable in their own skin and maybe not quite as embarrassed about some things because they know who they are, their identity in Christ, then they can share more details without worrying about, oh man, are people going to think wrong of me for this? Differently about me because they do know this, and so, because it is interesting because I've been in places, shared my testimony, and you do have different reactions. You have the people that will come up to you and go, man, thank you for being so transparent. Thank you for being so authentic and open. And then you'll have others, especially with me as a pastor, that will say, I don't know if you should have shared that as a pastor.
Well,
yeah. And so all I'm saying is
those people can eat it. Like, what?
Right.
This is what happened in my life. This is true facts.
Right.
So don't tell me not to say true facts.
I know. I'm just saying.
If they have to do with the story.
Right. I know.
This is like when we talked about movies.
Yeah.
This is the same thing.
Yes.
Where you don't show all the bad parts, so I don't get the feeling of the story at the end.
Right.
Like, if you're going to tell a story, you got to tell me all the like.
Yeah, but I do think there's a place. I think there's a place of going, okay, maybe I can grow in this and that kind of thing. And again, I think we can share some things, like using your example. I left the church, got in a dark place. Okay, give some context of what that means, right? I mean, was it depression? Was it alcohol? Was it, right? Like, what is dark place? Was it mental health? What was going on, right? And without having to even go into crazy specifics, just here's some things that happened, and then move on to, hey, but man, I came to know Christ, and this is what happened upon me coming to know Christ, and this is what it's been like since knowing Christ. So I think that there's a way to do all that with sharing things, but again, everyone's going to have a little different comfort level of what they feel comfortable sharing, and I'm cool. Like, as long as people are testifying about what Christ has done for them, like, I'm good. So maybe I sit here and go, I wish you were a little more transparent. But man, for some people, just to get up in front of people and say anything at all, right, is like, man, that's a huge thing. And I've had people, for example, that I knew that I thought their testimonies would be very impactful because of a certain topic or issue that their testimony involves with. And we've sat down, gone through it before, and then when they get up to share the testimony, even though that person and I walked through it and some of the things to include, they leave out some things because they're not quite ready to give all those details.
Oh, okay.
And I understand that. Like, I get that.
Okay.
So,
all right, Pastor Joseph Tillman, MDiv, soon to be D-Man.
Yeah.
What is your testimony?
What is my testimony?
Yep.
So my testimony is that I grew up in South Georgia and
boring.
At least I didn't start with, well, when I was born.
Yeah, whatever.
You ever heard those testimonies? You've been there for an hour.
Yeah.
You know, you got
in the beginning.
Right. We didn't go to church a whole lot. We went some, but not often. And then when I was 17, and I've shared this before, but I got 17, I get invited out to this retreat, and I come to know Christ. And then from 17 on, it has been a journey of living out this life of following Jesus. And, you know, when I mentioned earlier that when I heard the testimony of the individual that was speaking the night that I gave my life to Christ, he was sharing his testimony. And the part that connected with me the most was like, he was like, I've done these, you know, I've gone to the parties and I've done these things, and yet nothing really felt like fully like I never left like fulfilled, satisfied, you know, complete. And that was kind of the part that connected with me, like the emptiness kind of part. And I'm not sitting there saying I was like, you know, depressed or those kind of things, but like something just didn't feel complete. I don't know how else to phrase that. Mm-hmm. And so when I heard this individual give their testimony, when they got done, man, they did it like an altar call, and I went up front of this little chapel in Tigert, Georgia, or Camp Tigert in Georgia and South Georgia. I go up there, and you know, an individual comes up to me and they're like, "Hey, are you a Christian?" And I'll go, "No, I don't even really know what that means or is, you know, fully involved in that." And they were like, "Well," or no, I'm sorry. They said, "Are you saved?" And I said, I've never heard that phrase before in my life, and I hadn't. And they were like, you know, would you like to be? And I was like, I guess. Anyway, they ended up leading me to Christ. And the guy that led me to Christ ended up staying up with me till like 2 a.m, even explaining to me what all fully happened. What I knew was that I was apart from God and I wanted to be close with God. Like that's as much of the language as I understood. And that's as much as I understood in my head when I got saved. And then he kind of helped fill in some of those things of, who is Jesus? What does it look like to follow Christ? And then he began discipling me, and I've been really, to be honest with you, pretty much discipled ever since then, or at least part of discipleship groups ever since then. And so, yeah, for me, it's just been discovering who God is and who I am in Christ. And, you know, and I'm a pastor, and so I'm also, you know, I'm constantly asking, like, what is church and who is church and what does it look like for us to gather to worship this God that we say that we know? And, you know, yeah, so that's me in a nutshell.
Cool.
Yeah. So I didn't say any of the salacious stuff that, you know, you would want to hear.
Nope.
Yeah.
And you're not an assassin either.
I'm not.
Boring.
Right.
Don't
Next
book
guy.
Joseph.
Right. But I'll say this too, like, and I think that's a big deal. Like, you don't have to have this horrible past before you come to know Christ.
True.
And so, like, if you ask my wife about her testimony, it will come across as very, quote unquote, boring, right? Because she grew up in church, a quote unquote good girl, you know, behaved herself, and then comes to know Christ, as an early, the young teenager, and been, goes to a Christian college and been following Jesus ever since, and married a pastor, and right. I mean, like, so like you look back at her early, but there's nothing like about her, like before knowing Christ, that was like this horribly horrific thing, I mean, yes, she could say these are some things that went on and but like overall, it's not this like, oh wow. To be honest with you, her testimony is more powerful after coming to know Christ and some of the things that's happened since then. And I think that happens in testimonies too.
Okay.
Where some of the things that you're sitting there, they're already saying when they came to know Christ and they're 3 minutes into the 30-minute talk, and you're sitting there going, oh my God,
yeah,
this might just be boring. But actually the things that's happened in her life since then, to me, are the things that really that people would want to hear.
And then I became an assassin for Christ.
No. And so I think that, so if someone's listening, they're like, they grew up in church their whole life, kind of know Christ early, never did anything crazy. Like, you don't have no one's got to us, to the or to society, whatever. It may not be this wow, whoa, crazy testimony, but like the reality is, anyone who comes to know Christ, like that's a huge deal. Like that's the thing. Like, come to know Jesus.
We're gonna reject you from our new website, but you should still tell people your testimony.
It's okay. My testimony won't meet the criteria either. So
me either.
I've rejected from my own website. So, so I think that I don't know. I don't think we need to get caught up in that testimonies have to be this crazy thing. Like, no, at some point, hopefully you came to know Christ and you're still following him. Right. Mm-hmm. So I think actually, I think one of the more interesting testimonies is people who grew up in church, came to know Christ, walked away from Christ, and have come back to Christ.
Well, we don't have time to get into mine. So.
That's an interesting testimony. We'll just have Nate share his testimony next time.
Nah.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Well, this has been the When I Heard This Podcast. You can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram at When I Heard This Podcast, and X and locals at When I Heard This. Go to Patreon, $5. Like, subscribe, share, comment, follow, download. You can ring the notification bell, tell everyone that you know about the show, and go to the website where there's t-shirts. You can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Nate Robinsoff, and you can follow Joseph on Instagram at
Rev Joe T.
This has been the When I Heard This Podcast, and we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.